Hey everyone, my name is Charles and I'm currently a computer science and math student at the University of Ottawa, but 2 years ago I was a jazz piano student in Montreal trying to make my career dream come true. Here's how that happened. So my jazz piano journey started when I was 18. I had just graduated high school and I got into cégep in natural sciences. At that point I wanted to be a physicist. I was completely obsessed with this idea that a language could describe the physical world, and I thought that was so cool. Then, halfway through the semester, I discovered this guy named Jacob Collier. Now, if you don't know who Jacob Collier is, I would advise to go check him out. He can be a little polarizing though. A lot of people really hate him and a lot of people really love him. Now, I found myself in the second group. I absolutely loved him. Now, the reason why I fell in love with physics in the first place was because, as I said, it was a language that described the physical world. And when I discovered Jacob Collier, that same kind of love manifested from music. He used harmony and voice and timbre and so many other musical variables to express emotions in such a deep way that I couldn't help myself but just be wowed. At that point, I was hooked. Music was a language for emotions. I went crazy. I got crazy obsessed. In the shower thinking about chords, in the bus thinking about chords. I was listening to jazz all the time. I was always consuming jazz content, always watching videos, educational, whatever, everything. And my grades tanked. That semester, I got a 30% in chemistry, 30% in physics, and a 54% in calculus, which, considering that I didn't even attend the last exam in my calculus class, still pretty good. I'd say, hey, 54% without even going to the final. Instead, I was in practice rooms every day. I was completely immersing myself. I wanted to be a jazz player, and that's it. And although that obsession was slightly unhealthy, it taught me so much about being an autodidact and learning things by myself that I wouldn't make a different decision. I wouldn't do it differently. Now, by the end of cégep, I managed to sneak into the jazz piano program by first joining the jazz singing program and then sneakily transferring into piano. I would later use that same exact trick to get into comp sci, but I digress. At the end of cégep, I needed to audition. I needed to apply for university. I spent so long perfecting that application. It was COVID days, so you could still send in virtual applications and virtual auditions. I spent 4 weeks perfecting that audition. It was crisp, it was beautiful, it was mwah, but I burnt out. I didn't touch a piano for the next 2-3 months and I was dead. But all those sweat and tears paid off. I ended up getting into the University of Montreal with a scholarship and I was pumped. At that point, my entire life was laid out in front of me. I was gonna go to Montreal, I was gonna make it. Little did I know that that move would change everything. So I moved to Montreal at the end of June 2022. At that point, I was just about to start university, and that's when I started getting into music production. I got obsessed with the EQs, the filters, all the little plugins, synthesizers, how you could reproduce sounds with synths. I was obsessed, but it felt a little different. It wasn't really the music that interested me, it was more the tech. That's what really got me going. Now, as I was getting really into music production, my love of jazz was also morphing into something else. Moving to a new city, and more importantly having to pay rent, makes you realize that money matters. And I like freedom. I don't want to be tied to a dead-end job for the rest of my life. So I had to start thinking about money, and that changes things. That changes the way you make music. That changes the way you practice. Now, every time I was in a practice room or every time I was learning about music production, I wasn't necessarily just thinking about how can I make my craft better. I was thinking about how can I make money out of this. Slowly and slowly, my love of music was corrupted by that desire and that need for money, whilst my love of music production and tech slowly grew. But at that point, I was still deeply invested. I had sunk too much cost. I was like, no, I'm gonna be a jazz musician. There is nothing that's gonna change me. And I was very sure of that until I met my girlfriend. Now hear me out, this is what happened. When you fall in love, things change. Priorities changed. Back then I didn't care, and by back then I mean before I met her, I didn't care if I was gonna wait tables and eat water for the rest of my life just to make my dream happen. But when I met her, I started thinking about building a future with her, and that became more important. That was the tipping point. That's what gave me the courage to say, okay, I'm gonna pursue tech. I dropped out of uni at the end of my first semester in winter 2023, and I was adrift. I had built my entire identity around playing jazz piano, around being this guy who just loves music, and all of a sudden, I didn't have that anymore. I knew I loved technology, but I hadn't coded a single line of code in my life. I was scared and confused as to where to go next. But if my jazz piano journey taught me anything, is that you can learn anything if you put your mind to it, and that things typically aren't as hard as you think they are. So I put my head down and I started learning. At that point, I wasn't in university anymore, so I had to work. So I got a job as a waiter in a downtown restaurant in Montreal. Now the schedule was from 4 p.m. to 4 a.m. This is not a schedule I would recommend if you're trying to learn stuff. Sleep is important, people. But regardless, for a few months, I tried to learn about web dev. I tried to do a boot camp, 30% in chemistry, 30% in physics, and 54% in calculus. The odds were looking grim, to say the least. At that point, my girlfriend and I moved to Gatineau for job opportunities, but I really wanted to make this happen, so I got a part-time job and I joined Cégep to get those prerequisite classes. I got done with those and I applied to the University of Ottawa. I applied in math and I applied in comp sci. Now, funnily enough, they rejected me in comp sci. They just accepted me in math, but that was all the crack I needed to get in. Once I got there and I saw the math schedule, I was like, man, screw that, I want to do comp sci. So I ended up just taking all the comp sci courses. There are no rules or restrictions that say you can't take comp sci courses as a math major. So I just made my schedule and enrolled in all the comp sci courses as if I was a comp sci student. Now this was a little bit risky because if I failed those and if I didn't perform well enough, then I'd just have a bunch of useless credits that I can't use towards my degree and my math degree would just be completely behind. But I had trust. I had faith in myself. I knew that if I applied myself and if I truly tried to learn for the right reasons, then I'd get good grades. And lo and behold, it worked. I'm still alive. I am not dead. 2 years later, I'm a computer science and math double bachelor's student, and I've got a 3.9 GPA, so that's pretty cool. Now, I truly think and truly believe from the bottom of my heart that the reason I'm able to perform well and the reason I'm able to get those good grades is because of my jazz piano journey. I learned more about learning and being an autodidact in those 3 years than I could have learned any other way. I honestly don't know how this video will perform. This video's goal is not to get tons of views. It's really just to act as an anchor to my channel. I want to start on the right note, and I think that being honest and telling my story is the right place to start. Honestly, I've been wanting to do this and start a YouTube channel for a long time. As a kid, I used to make Minecraft videos. Everyone has had that dream of being a YouTuber or a Minecraft YouTuber at some point. It always ends up being just remnants of motivation somewhere in the back of a YouTube channel. But I'm really gonna try to make this happen. And honestly, my attitude towards learning has not changed much. My identity, turns out, is exactly the same. I love learning. I love learning new things. And I'm very passionate about what I do. I learned about topology and probability and all those supposedly complex topics the same way that I did about chords, harmony, music production, and all those things. It's all the same thing. Look, if you take away anything from this video, I think it should be this. It's never too late to start something new. Never too late to learn about something and to try to better yourself. You might think that you're too old or you're too this, or I've already spent so much time and invested so much in this. You might think you're not a math person, you're not a tech person, you're not a this person, I'm not an artsy person. But the truth is that if you don't try and if you don't believe in yourself, then you'll always be proven right. But trust me when I say this. It's not as hard as you think. Just try.